Hello, Cardinals fans. How are you? I hope you're doing well where you're at, because it's been a rough week for many Cardinals fans. So here we are once again, TCR and friends, with our group therapy session. I must do my disclaimer that TCR and friends are not licensed professional counselors and make no claims to be. Group therapy is used for entertainment purposes only. But here we are. It feels like, for a lot of fans, the sky is falling because Sean Payton and DeMeco Ryan's off the table. So we're going to talk about that. But Troy, how are you coping, my friend?
My name's Troy Honecker. I've been an addict for 12 years. Oh, no, this is not the... Sorry.
I've been a Cardinals fan for...
for a very long time. No, I'm good. I mean, I wasn't hit too hard by the Sean Payton news as some others. I was actually a little shocked at some of the reaction to the Sean Payton news, but I'm good. I mean, at this point, I feel like we've had a lot of start off with like, how's everyone doing? Not great. And so at this point, I've just come steeled, emotionally and dead inside. So
I feel that. And I was probably similar to you. I would have loved to have Sean Payton. I think he's a really good coach. But for me, it was not Sean Payton or bust, right? So I wasn't as devastated as some folks are. But, some of the reaction was, we're screwed. This is it. That was our only hope. And that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about why I'm going to present the case for hope. Now, I just kind of want to make this disclaimer. The purpose of today is to outline the case for hope and talk about what the search is. If you think I'm wrong, or you think there is no hope, or it really was Payton or Ryan's or bust and we're screwed, and you want to debate that, that's not what tonight is for. I'm not going to get into those debates. I respect your opinions. I'm more just presenting the case. There are a lot of fans who, that of the Cardinals that I interact with who regularly tell me, listen, I really appreciate that when stuff goes down, you get on that live stream and you kind of just cool the temperature a little bit. You're like, okay, well, let's just look at everything. Look what could happen. No guarantees it's going that way, but let's look at talk people down from the proverbial ledge. So that's kind of what we're doing here today. I'm not saying this is, all these optimistic things we're going to look at. I'm not going to say that's what will happen, but I do believe there's a genuine and honest case for hope in this situation. And we're going to kind of unpack that. I'm going to say hey to some of the folks that are in the chat that are here with us. And then we're going to get into kind of unpacking what is going on. So obviously we've got Grandizer, who's holding down the chat. Really appreciate you, Grandizer. Thank you for being here. We have Randy Morrison. What's up? Is this a place where I can cry and not be judged? Randy, it is a place where you can cry and not be judged. We are here in this together. We are here to help you through it. You're amongst friends, Randy. We have Nick L. At least we won't have to see Cliff's face anymore. We got that going for us. Maybe, yeah. We've got D'Lo. I have a lot of research homework to do for university, but I want to stop by and say hello. I hope we hire someone soon. Thanks for stopping in. Appreciate you stopping by. Get that homework done. I'm sure your professors will appreciate you getting it done, and they would probably be mad at me if I kept you away from it. We've got Eduardo Brunetto from is it Brazil, Argentina? I'm sorry, you have to tell me. I always get it wrong, but we appreciate your regular attendee at Mock Draft Mondays. Someone to follow on Twitter. Well, I need this because I'm really devastated. I feel that. That's why we are here. Sam Mooring, I'm glad we keep our picks, but I don't understand why the Cardinals haven't found anyone we like yet. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So, yeah. Let's see. We got Jason Sandoval. Thank you for being here. What's up, fellas? We need to get this head coaching hire right. Anyone but Vance Joseph at this point. I generally agree that I'm not for Vance Joseph as the head coach. We'll talk about that a little bit probably. Randy's saying I like Lou Anarumo. So a lot of people like him. We'll talk about him. We have Mike Hoffer. Thank you for being here. Trusted Monty and the process. Listen, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt till at this point, right? And then we'll see what happens, right? Brazil, thank you, Edward. I appreciate that. Correcting me. Ben Cork, I'm glad we didn't trade any picks. There's a lot of fans who feel that way, so that's good to see. My fave tech saying don't blame Sean. quarterback with a bad reputation of not studying will get better somehow. I think it's not as simple as that. We'll talk about that. But I do think the situation is a big part of what happened, the roster in general. Chris Young is here. I don't know what the answer is regarding the head coach position, but to say that Payton is the only coach who could turn things around is just not something I can get behind. Right. And history does not support the idea that Payton's the only coach that can get things right. Now, doesn't mean it's a guarantee. We have to find that person, right? But yeah. Drew McWhorter. Andrew, I'm watching Osiris Torrance tape. What? TCR is on. Me stops the tape. Appreciate that. I appreciate that that you picked me over Osiris Torrance and the Senior Bowl. So thank you. Appreciate you being here, Drew. Jose, thank you for being here. Whining and holding your fire. Everyone picket signs. You got you in this position in the first place. Be careful what you wish for in the first place. So you're saying, yeah, wanting to fire them got us here. That's true. Farce Quest, so nervous about hiring a first-year coach. I hear that. We're going to talk about that, though, because I am not worried about a first-year coach as long as they have NFL experience. That's the thing. But we'll get to that. Red Sea, am I the only one who is actually happy we didn't trade for Payton? You're not the only one. There are people who are. But all right, so let's talk about how everything that kind of unfolded, right? So a lot happened, right? So, obviously after weeks of questions and speculation and hopes and prayers, Sean Payton interviewed with Michael Bidwell and the Arizona Cardinals brass. And after the meeting, everyone was on kind of pins and needles and waiting to see what was going to happen and waiting for news of who the former Saints coach would pick. And, amidst the anxiety steeped time, the coach who was once suspended for his role in the Bounty Gate scandal. And let me just say, I was looking at this is years old, but from a fashion police perspective, the pleats on those pants is a scandal in and of itself.
I mean, and the visors too. It
Yeah.
reminds me of did you see the Jimmy Fallon bit with Bradley Cooper? They're wearing the Philly. You have to watch it because they can't keep it together because they look just like these guys. It's good.
I'll need to check that. Awesome. So Sean Payton was known for Bounty Gate, but he created a new scandal. That's right, tie gate. Is it Bronco orange or Cardinal red? Right. So he wears his tie. During his role in the studio on the games, and Cardinals fans, that's Cardinal red, and Broncos fans, it's Bronco orange. Well, apparently it was Broncos orange. And if that wasn't bad enough, that happened. Then we got news that indeed, Sean Payton was had agreed to go to the Broncos, and a trade was being worked out. So we were out on him. And then if that wasn't bad enough, literally moments later, news dropped that, DeMeco Ryans, who was my top choice and a lot of people's second choice, was hired by the Houston Texans. Now, that wasn't a surprise. I think we all kind of figured that was going to happen. It was an outside chance we'd even get an interview rescheduled with him. But, that was frustrating, right? And so, once again, Cardinals, were spurned by a Payton in favor of our four corners neighbor, the Denver Broncos. And, Cardinals fans felt a certain way about that, right? They were upset about this. A lot of fans were saying we're screwed. That was our only chance. That, Payton was a sure thing. I don't want to go with a unproven new coach and all that. And I get that. Payton was the safest bet, right? No doubt. But that guy is only around off. That guy isn't available every off season. I know some people say, well, that's why we should have gone for it. And we did go for it. He picked the Broncos, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But more often than not, you are getting either a retread without his track record, or a first-time coach. So we're going to talk about this tonight, why it's not, at least I, and I think Troy agrees with me, do not think it's as bleak as some fans say. We are not screwed yet. We might end up being, depending on where we go from here. But there is a case for hope and optimism that we're going to present. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about, kind of the stuff around how Sean Payton went down, the whole situation went down. Because one of the things you're hearing, at least I'm hearing this narrative from fans, is they keep talking about, wow, the Broncos gave up a first round pick and they trade a second round pick next year and got a third round pick back. We could, man, I would have offered the number 3 pick if why didn't we offer more? Like as though we missed out on him because we weren't offering enough in draft capital in the trade. And I want to just make it clear, like the picks were not, unless there's something we hear that, Michael Bidwell, like that, Payton wanted to come here, but Michael backed out because of the picks, which I don't think is the case. I think he went into it knowing what the cost would be, probably our second round pick and change this year or first round next year. Roughly that would be comparable if we, depending on the day 2 pick or day 3 picks we had to what Denver offered. I think he was willing to pay what it would take if they could strike the deal. So it wasn't like, oh, we got outbid by the Broncos in terms of the trade. The trade was worked out after, right? The thing that matters is Payton picked the Broncos. Now, if we hear later that Bidwell backed out, or that he lowballed the salary, because that's a thing that could have come into play, okay, then maybe we can criticize Bidwell. But like, from what it looks like, both teams courted him. I don't know if the Cardinals made him an offer. I'm going to guess they did, but maybe we'll find out. Maybe we won't. But he picked the Broncos. And, the Broncos have a healthy quarterback, a better roster in terms of their defense is legit. They have offensive playmakers. I think Sean Payton looked at the situation and thought, if I can fix Russell Wilson, which I think he thinks he can, I'm sure he thinks he can, I can contend in 2023. Now, we may not agree with that, but I think Sean Payton looked at that roster and said, if I can fix Russ, and I think I can, that team is ready to be competitive right now. And then he looked at the Cardinals and said, quarterback's injured. Defense needs work. Offensive line needs retooled. 2024 is probably the first year I have a chance to contend. And I think he picked the Broncos for that reason. I really think that's what it came down to. If I hear new information and I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But that's what I think it was. And if that's what it is, I'm not going to take Michael Bidwell to task for not doing enough. If he put everything out there and if Michael Bidwell put everything out there and Payton simply picked the Broncos or was just leveraging us the whole time, that's not, Michael did everything he could in this situation, right? So that's my take. Do you have what are your thoughts on everything? I know just kind of monologued for a bit. So Troy, I'll shut up and let you get into the conversation.
It's your show, man. These are your rules. I'm just riding along. No, but if you think about it, like from a bird's eye point of view, like let's kind of walk through why Sean Payton wasn't even coaching in the first place. He didn't want to go through the Saints rebuild. So clearly he's not going to want to choose a team that is like maybe baby steps ahead of the Saints in terms of a rebuild. Like you said, he wants to go to a team that's just a quarterback essentially away, which I think, I don't think Russell Wilson's as good as he was, but I don't think he's as bad as he's looked at all. And towards the end of last season, we kind of saw flashes of Russ cooking, as they say. So it makes sense. My personal opinion, I think Bidwell's a little gun shy in the salary, going from still having to pay Cliff and then also paying probably going to be the most expensive or one of the most expensive head coaches in the NFL, while also giving up some draft capital that, we want to see Monty use it. What's the point? That's the point of getting a nice a new GM external. Like, well, let's see what you're going to do with our draft capital. And so it makes sense. I think it was interesting and fascinating that he was essentially the Broncos' third pick between Harbaugh, Ryans, and then Sean Payton. So that maybe like the fact that they got down to 3 and we didn't really push that hard might show that we were out. Like, no, you can have him. Like, and no one else really seemed to want him. Everyone kept saying his market dried up. So yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not super distraught over it. I think I kind of liked it, but one back thing in my head, it was like, what if it's just going to be like the Commanders head coach, what's his name, Ron Rivera? I'm like, yeah, what if this is Ron Rivera 2.0 for us, except like, comes back, isn't quite as good as he was at one time. So I don't know, we'll see. He put himself in the hardest division in football, so have fun with that, my man. Good luck.
Yeah, For sure. Well, let me. There's some folks who jumped in, and let me get some of the comments, and then we'll move on from there. But yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. Let's see. We've got Drew. I know he's been here, but Drew just said same Red Sea, far too pricey. Maybe my fake tech here. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Right. Mikey Desert Cardinal says, honestly, I'm going to trust Monty to hire the right person. His future as a GM depends on it, making the right hire as the coach. So he goes, man, I'm giving, like I said, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I think he'll get it right, but we'll see. We don't know till we see.
There was a good point that I heard either on, I don't know if it was on Air Sport, but this is going to be Monty's first coach hiring. At the Patriots, he had Bill Belichick. At Tennessee, they had Vrabel.
Yeah.
Maybe at the Texans, there probably was turnover at the Texans. Knowing that franchise, but so this will be his first hiring, so we'll see. That's probably why we have so many,
he wants to be thorough, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Tom Baum says, let's keep our picks and do this the right way. Marcus, the rough stuff love says, I want Flores, but who's going to run the offense? Not many options at this point. Maybe hold out for Steichen. Yeah. Here's the thing, like, if you go with Flores, you're definitely obviously going more defense, at least initially. The offensive coordinator is probably going to be someone who's a quarterback's coach somewhere right now. That's usually, it might be another position coach. That's usually what happens. And there are good quarterbacks coaches out there who are going to step in and be, so you look for a quarterbacks coach from a good offense who learned under someone, right? One of the guys we'll talk about here was a quarterbacks coach and then went to be an offensive coordinator, is now a candidate for the Cardinals job. So I think most of us just don't know who those quarterbacks coaches are out there, but like Zach Taylor, Bengals coach, was actually a quarterbacks coach when he was hired as the head coach. So that's who it would be. I've said this before. I think if you get the defense, you build a really good defense, a good offensive line, and emphasize like getting some good running game going, an average offensive coordinator in the NFL can win in that situation. That's if you build it that way. And I think that's what they would do then. Let's see who else is, we got, I know a couple of folks that just jumped in. We got Logan Little. Do you think Payton leaked the info about Kyle's return to rap? I don't think so. It's possible though, because maybe he was trying to, so much of this stuff is trying to spin public opinion. And so who knows? So maybe I don't know. I'm trying to
that whole report from that whole rap report is just, no pun intended. It's just kind of BS. Like, I'm sorry, but it's only been a month since he's injured it. 2 months. No one has any idea like how close or how far he is. Like,
yeah,
it was just speculation. It's here. The dark. I mean, let's think about it. Like, Kyler's always in the news for reasons no one knows why, because I don't know why people want to keep talking about him in one of the smallest, like, small market teams, quote unquote, because it's clicks, it's attraction, and that's why they keep beating a dead horse. Like, we'll talk about it later. Someone commented about the facilities, which was totally inaccurate. It's just like people are just like beating a dead horse. It's the media dog pile, as it were to say. So
yeah, like
Rappaport's BS.
When I saw that Rappaport, I didn't think much of it, because like when Kyler first got injured, I saw reports that said maybe start of season, but more likely 3 or 4 weeks in, and like a year in, he's going to be at 90%. So like just none of that seemed like new information to me. I think people latched on to that he's not going to rush it, and because they want to go with that narrative about Kyler. So
exactly, yeah.
So I don't think do I think that that was from? I don't even know. I don't think so. I don't know what
Odegaard said it wasn't from his camp.
Yeah,
I don't know why it would be from Payton. That doesn't.
Yeah. What's the motivation, right? So yeah. A couple other comments we can get here. Let's see. Michael said Michael has already shown he's willing to make major changes. I'm not putting losing Payton on him. Listen, I know he has a reputation for being tight with the purse strings, and because they don't have as much money as other ownership groups, but like I think he was willing to pay it if he needed to. I mean, I think he expressed in that press conference that he would pay what he needed to, but that the biggest name wasn't necessarily a best name. But you know, I think the fact that he swallowed that pill of those contracts from Cliff and Keim, he's like, I'm going to do what I got to do. Right. So I just don't think that would have been it. But Eduardo saying, I don't see the Broncos as contenders for the Super Bowl next year, but Sean Payton can bring Seahawks Wilson back. Then this is a great news to the Broncos fan. Yeah. If he can do that, that's the if, right? Then Farce Quest said, now we apparently have to upgrade our facilities. AQ Shipley was on, as you mentioned, was on Pat McAfee's and was kind of trashing the facilities and say, well, if you don't want to be an NFL owner and do everything that it takes to be one, then sell the team. And they have upgraded. And let's remember, it's been a minute since AQ Shipley was part of the team. So, maybe they were that way when he was there. I don't know, but he's been kind of piling on the Cardinals for a while now. He's maybe not as prominent as Pat Peterson in terms of, people listening to him, but he's been another one of those guys. So
one of the holdovers of the Keim era is clearly players left very jilted, disgruntled by it. So you just got to roll with it. And again, most NFL players don't leave on the best terms with the team because they're getting cut.
and we talked about that. And I think, and we've talked about this before, I think Keim really did kind of rub people the wrong way. So, so I'm going to take that stuff with a grain of salt. Be like, well, they have there's a reason they're salty, and it's Keim's fault. So let's just let them do that. Right. Grimdark Brian here saying, Gazornik is Brian. Grimdark, I'm sorry, I'm getting you all confused. But Grimdark is an active part of our Discord. Don't blame Mike at all for this. Just being associated with Denver Broncos has most prestige. I mean, they are, a storied franchise, right? Air Noobs saying, what coaches are you guys looking forward to hiring? We're going to actually get to that later. So I'm going to save that for later. But we're going to talk about some of those candidates that are currently, we think, at least I think, are the top. And we'll hear what your thoughts, and we'll kind of talk about how we feel about those. So we're definitely going to get to that. Jackie, thanks for being here. Hi, Joe. Anyone advanced to this point, right? I mean, listen, kind of that. I could live with any of the candidates that are tied to them other than Vance, but there are some I like better. So I would generally, right? Grandizer asking, are the Cardinals really rebuilding or retooling? The right coach turns it around quickly. I think like it's a matter of semantics, right? Like what's the difference? And sometimes what do those words even mean? Here's what I think it is. We're keeping the quarterback. Everything else, it's hard to know. I could see players being traded or released or moved on from. Everything else is on the table. I think this team could be ready to go by 2024 and be retooled very quickly if they fix the offensive line and keep building on the defense. They can be ready. But if they try to do something more comprehensive, it might take longer. Real quickly, what are your thoughts on that, Troy?
Yeah, I mean, we all saw the Giants. No one gave the Giants a snowball's chance in hell this year, and look at that. They were in the playoffs and coming out one of the toughest divisions in the NFC East. So I think rebuilding, I imagine you'd assume there's like 6-7 holes that needs to be filled, or retooling's like, oh, you need 2 or 3 guys and then you're good.
Yeah.
I'm leaning slightly towards the retooling side. I don't think we need a full rebuild, like I said, but I think there's some talented pieces on the team. Yeah, I mean, I think next year if we shoot around like 7-9, around 500, I think that'd be a success. Why not? Who cares?
Yeah, I think what you look for is year one is a little bit of a mulligan, but you want to be scrappy, right? Think the Lions are the perfect model for this. Year one, you want to be scrappy, and you're installing your system, making your personnel changes, trying to get the people in the building you want, and you have tempered expectations. Year two, you want to be scrappy and fighting for a playoff spot. Lions, that's where they were. They didn't get there, but they're fighting. And year three, you want to be a playoff team with a chance to contend.
I think as long as you feel like you're not getting out coached, and that's like in each game, then yeah, you're doing all right. Like, I mean, there was times in Cliff's first year where it's like, whoa, he has no idea what he's doing at the moment, and so if we don't have to feel like that, then I'm doing all right.
Right. AZ Off saying, my gripe with it all is we gave up on Sean, then had some hope and got crushed. And I think he just used us as leverage. Coward has had dinners with him and never mentioned Arizona. Yeah. And, to me, that's more the media narratives and Sean than anything we did. I guess we could have not interviewed him, but, he got, he was not taken serious. Arizona wasn't taken serious by the media as a real team for a player. Then he's on site and the market cools. So then they start talking about us. and then we get crushed. So that's unfortunately that's how it goes. We got P Tree Pack. Thanks for being here. Trade down, get a cornerback and O-line first. A lot of my mock drafts I end up doing that. So yeah. I have no faith in any of these coaches lasting more than 2-3 years. Scratching my head.
That's like the average NFL coach lifespan, I feel like, right?
Yeah, right. So we'll see, right? Yeah. Randy's saying today Rappaport said that if the Cardinals don't hire one of the Bengals guys today or tomorrow, then it means they're waiting on the guys in the Super Bowl. I think he said a coward. I think that makes some sense because, you've got like the Senior Bowl coming up and you people are talking about if you can get your coach hired soon and get that started, get them out there even for that, that'd be great. So if they're waiting into the weekend, they don't hire one of these guys, maybe they are waiting for that, right? So let me get a few more of these comments and then we'll move along to some of the other stuff we want to talk about. Simon, thanks for being here. How do we feel about Lou Anarumo as head coach and Greg Roman as OC? We'll talk about Anarumo. I'm Roman.
Not big on Roman.
Yeah, there's arguments for him, but he's not top of my list. But Anarumo, I'm intrigued by. Brett C with the super chat. Thank you so much. Just hired TCR. Yes, I would be the worst coach ever. Someone said that in the Discord, and I said, I just kind of typed in there, Joe. All right, everybody, we're going to install the Statue of Liberty offense staff. You mean Statue of Liberty play, Joe? I said what I mean. Right. So yeah, I would be horrible, obviously, at that, but yeah. So let's see. We got a few other folks that just jumped in. I think Logan's been here. I love Kyler. We all seen how good he is. I want him to take his time. My thing is Bidwell or Austin Fort have mentioned to one of these candidates. Kyler possibly might take season. That's possibly might have been why, right? Yeah. Van,
if he has a setback or tweak, then he's going to come back 3 weeks for the season. It's like, yeah, of course. Like,
yeah, I think a lot of when he comes back is going to depend on how the team's doing. If they are actually overachieving and like pushing for a playoff spot, they get him back. If they're not, they're going to take their time, right? Van saying it's definitely Brian Flores. I don't think it is as much as I'd like it to be, and we'll talk about why.
You would have hired him by now, right? Or he would have been back for a second round.
That's kind of the reasoning. We'll get to him a little bit later, but I think the fact that he hasn't been brought back for center is basically the indicator of that. And then we have Rose Jenkins. Broncos have more risk with Wilson trade and short-term future. Payton more of a need for them. Therefore, the first at a big contract. Yeah, I'm sure they really pushed for him after they were out on Ryan. So, all right, I wanted to get everyone at least one comment. And so we talked a little bit about how kind of the Payton thing went. And how we think the situation, how it went down in terms of him picking the Broncos. But what I want to do now is talk about the case for hope. Okay. People saying, like I said, people are saying, well, we missed out on Payton. That was our only chance. We blew it. Now we've got to deal with either a retread who hasn't been good or a first-time coach without experience. And I want someone with experience. We're going to have a first-time coordinator who's we had a young coach with Cliff with little experience. I don't want that again. And what I want to do is I'm going to argue that first-time head coaches who were coordinators or position coaches, sometimes like a quarterback's coach, actually are successful more than people I think sometimes realize. I mean, obviously every coach was a first-time coach at one point. So the great coaches were successful as first-time coaches, but it's more, they have more success quickly than people might think. Now there are obviously coaches who flounder and struggle, but it's not as hopeless as you think. And those first time coaches even if they don't have much experience, they can do really well as long as that experience is at the NFL level. The place we went wrong with Cliff are two things. One, and we've talked about this a lot, his offense probably isn't suited well to the NFL without adjustments. Too dependent on the star receivers and too predictable. But second, all of his coaching experience was at the college level, right? And college coaches just have not done well, like in forever, right? Cliff has been one of the more successful college coaches in the NFL in the last couple decades based on his record. And that's telling you how bad that's been, right? So what I want to do is I've put together just some images and just kind of a slideshow, so to speak, of some of the first-time head coaches who were hired over the last 6 years and a couple extras. Now, this is not a comprehensive list of every first-time coach. What I've got here are the first-time coaches who are, most of them are still hired and either have winning records, or if they have a losing record, they're on here for a reason because they've had success. I'm not including coaches that were an interim coach like Dan Campbell was. And I'm not including the coaches that were bad, not because I'm not trying to pretend like there isn't an Eberflus or an Adam Gase or those kinds of people out there. But what I want to do is show you examples of how every year, almost every year, there's a couple good coaches that emerge that were never head coaches before, right? So like 2022, this season, right? Brian Dable was hired after being an offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. He'd been offensive coordinator multiple different times. He'd been around for a while, but this was his first head coaching gig with the New York Giants team that had Daniel Jones that, I still am not a believer in him as the guy, and a roster that needs a lot of work. And they started out hot. Yes, they kind of slid, fell off down the stretch, but they had a winning record. And I think most people say that he's done a really good job and would take him as a coach. Then you have Kevin O'Connell, who had a really good 13-4. Now, I get it. A lot of this is the Vikings were viewed by most people as the most fraudulent team in the NFL. They collapsed in the playoffs. Listen, I get it. Cliff vibes from some people. And so I'm not saying he's all that, but 13-4 record, that's success off the bat, right? Now we'll see. And, is it Kirk Cousins? They need a different quarterback. Is that the issue? Because Kirk has a certain reputation, but I think objectively speaking, this guy looks like a good coach, at least for first blush, right? Now there's some other coaches in here that are maybe a little more question marks, right? Mike McDaniel's more of a question mark. He started off really good with the Dolphins. Some issues with how he managed the health of his quarterback, right? Some people, but there are people who, like, with what he showed in terms of the offense and what he was able to do when his quarterback was healthy. There's a lot of people that would take Mike McDaniel and feel like this guy's a promising offensive coach. So he might be a TBD for you, or maybe you might be out on him, but still a coach with some promise, right? Then we go to 2021, Nick Sirianni. Going to the Super Bowl, right? Enough said, right? He's obviously, they've got a great roster, but going to the Super Bowl, that's a good hire, right? Success very quickly. Now, Brandon Staley's another more of a question mark. He has a winning record. He was thought to be on the hot seat, but they retained him. Maybe he's not a guy you would say I'd take him, but still a first-time coach that had a winning record. Now, 2020 is the one year where there isn't a guy that I feel like is a slam dunk you would keep him. Thus far, every year there's at least one coach I would slam dunk take as my head coach. 2020, the only guy with a winning record out of there that's still around is Kevin Stefanski with the Browns. Started off better and finished. The records were better early on, then they've struggled. Maybe that's the quarterback situation. Maybe he is a good coach. This is a question mark to be determined, right? So this is the one year like, okay, maybe there isn't that guy. 2019, Matt LaFleur, 47-19. Had a rough year this year. Yes, has a great quarterback, but still that record is just outstanding. Like, you would take him, right? Zach Taylor, the record is bad because they were in a rebuild, started off bad. Super Bowl last year, AFC Championship game this year. I think most people would take this guy as your coach. Brian Flores, I include on here. He doesn't have a winning record, but if you look at it, he had a rough first year was rough because the roster bad. Made drastic improvements second year, fell back a little bit in the third year, but was still really shouldn't have been fired based on what he'd done. I didn't think he in terms of the record deserved to retain, but I include him on here because he's a name that we're talking about as a potential Cardinals coach.
Well, and his owner was trying to get him to lose. So
yeah, I blame the front office for a lot of that stuff there, but absolutely. 2018, Mike Vrabel, 48-34. Yeah, they had a little bit of rough year this year, but he's, I think, been viewed as maybe thus far, the only successful Belichick sort of, kind of protege, so to speak. But, a good coach, right, with a winning record that I think a lot of people would take. Frank Reich, right, has a winning record. Yeah, he was fired by the Indianapolis Colts. They also didn't exactly have the best quarterback situation, the revolving door, but he just got a job. I think a lot of Cardinals fans would have would have been happy if he was hired, but he was the first coach hired by this season. So this is another first-time coach, right? Then 2017 was the year to hire a first-time head coach. Kyle Shanahan. I know, people talk about his losing seasons and some things. He has a winning record, though, has been to the Super Bowl, back-to-back NFC Championship games, has had issues keeping healthy quarterbacks. But objectively speaking, he's been a good coach, right? And most teams would take that. Sean McVay, enough said, right? Like literally, like he's this generation, the great coach of this generation in many people's views. His coaching tree leads to guys like Zach Taylor and all those guys. Obviously, take him. And one of my favorites is an underrated coach is Sean McDermott, right? 62-35, actually has a better record than McVay, right? So like, here's kind of the point. And I'll throw a few others that are a little bit more in the way back. John Harbaugh was a first-time head coach, right? Mike Tomlin had 1 year as a defensive coordinator, had 6-7 years coaching, wasn't a coach forever in the NFL. So here's kind of the point I'm making here. Every year, for the last 6 years, with the exception of maybe 2020, there's at least one first-time NFL head coach who I would take in a heartbeat. And most years, there's 2 or 3. That coach is out there. There is a good coach out there who we can win with, who, if we get the roster right, can get us deep into the playoffs. The tough part is we got to find him. That's where the interviews come. As fans, we can just go based on what we've seen from the performances and where they've been. We just kind of take indicators. Monty Ossenforth and Michael Bidwell in those interviews have to ask the right questions, get the right information, make the right decision. But there's at least one and probably 2 or 3 coaches out there that can turn this thing around. The cupboards aren't bare in terms of potential head coaches. It is not as dire as people think. There's a guy out there to find. There's risk. With Payton, there was less risk. I get that. But that guy's out there. There's my monologue on this one. Troy, thoughts?
No, I mean, absolutely right. And I feel like sometimes it's always like the guy that comes out of nowhere, you least expect it. It happens to always kind of be the dark horse, as it were. But yeah, it's the NFL, man. There's always smart people that are lurking, quote unquote, in the shadows that will, make a name for himself. Again, Mike Tomlin's always, I think he's the GOAT in my opinion. I love Mike Tomlin. And you have a lot of experience either. And I think even it's funny now, like some of the kind of narrative is even if they weren't a great coordinator, they could still make a good head coach. Like Vrabel was had the worst defense when he was defensive coordinator, but look at him. He's doing a good job. So, I mean, like most teams too, like it's just like a 3-headed dragon of quarterback, head coach, front office / GM. Like, it's like a tug of war and who's going to, elevate or devalue the team, as it were, de-elevate, I guess, descend the team, whatever that analogy would be. So yeah, I mean, we think we have a winner in the GM. We think our quarterback's good when he comes back, and then now we just got to hope we have a good head coach. But I think, again, if we have 2 out of the 3, you're usually in a pretty good position. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Let me say to a couple of folks that came in during my second monologue of the show. So if I miss anyone, I apologize. We've got Omar. Thanks for being here. I'm scared if we get Shane Steichen, he's going to be similar to Cliff, where he's young. And I think Brian would be solid. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talking about that also with some of the other candidates. I know everyone's worried that, the whole, was he too buddy? And I don't think that's really, really the problem. I think they weren't winning. It was the offense and the roster. The roster is something we have to trust Monty Ossenforth to get right. Steve Keim built a roster that wasn't built, I think, in an optimal way. Too many old aging veterans, not enough good draft picks, emphasizing wrong positions in the draft. The offensive system, again, like Cliff was young, but again, his experience was not at the NFL, and his offense didn't have enough NFL stuff, and he didn't make enough adjustments. So I'm just not worried about that, because you look at these young, again, Zach Taylor, Kevin O'Connell, Nick Sirianni, these first-time coaches with not tons of experience who come in and get it right. So it's, to me, that's not really, again, we'll see, right? But so anyway, yeah. A couple other folks who dropped in here. We've got Isaiah Johnson. Thanks for being here. What about the Saints? Co-DC Chris Richards. I mean, I know he was recently released. Maybe they reach out to him for an interview. I don't know that I would go after him as a head coach, but who knows? We'll see, right? We've got Facundo. Thank you for being here. Hello, Joe, and all TCR mates. Appreciate you hanging out with us for sure. Robert Morris jumped in. I'll take the OC from the Bengals. We will talk about Callahan in a bit. Let's see. And Josh is saying, Josh Burleson, thanks for being here. Honestly, we need to expand who we're interviewing and not be afraid to interview college coaches. I feel like there's lack of experience on a lot of these people's resumes. I'll tell you, I appreciate you being here and everything, but I don't look at it that way. I am absolutely out on college coaches based. There's just not enough success with that lately. I
think only if they had NFL experience prior to being in college.
Right.
Like now they're coming back.
Yes,
but Dable he was an NFL, went to Alabama, back to NFL.
And even then, he came back as an offensive coordinator before.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I don't mind college experience on the resume because most of these guys have some college experience, but I don't want someone coming straight from college and this is their first head coaching job. Now, if you want to look at the college ranks for an offensive coordinator, you talked about the Georgia, coach as an offensive coordinator. That's fine. But your head coach, to me, I'm not.
He's going to the Bucks. He's interviewing at the Bucks, which that's where the OC was with under Cutter.
Dirk Cutter, yeah, interesting.
Dirk Cutter, yeah. So
and again, like I said, and let me tell you, when I prepared for today, I went through every current NFL head coach and looked at their resume or their Wikipedia page. Let's be honest, but looked at where they had been. Right. I looked at every current head coach and the guys who've been hired so far. And I looked at where did they coach? How long have they been coaching the NFL? How many years were they coaching the NFL? How many years? What was their role before they were hired? How many years did they spend as a coordinator? And I'm going to just tell you, like successful coaches don't need to have a ton of experience. They're successful coaches that had 5 or 7 years of experience. And we're talking starting as an intern defensive assistant and working their way up 7 years and being a good head coach. And then there were some that toiled around for longer. Brian Dable spent more years toiling before he got that first gig. Mm-hmm. But there's plenty of coaches, guys like Sirianni that were 7, 8 years working their way up and then they're head coach. So to me, I'm just telling you, I looked at all these coaches and I did not see a pattern that said you have to have head coaching experience to be successful or tons of experience. You have to have the right experience, and usually you have to have learned under the right coach and been successful in a couple places. I think from having looked at everything, looked at all the coaches' resumes, I think people are overrating the importance of having, a 20-year resume, as you mentioned in here. I mean, yeah, you can find that guy and listen, sometimes that guy works out really well, but sometimes it doesn't. So
there might be a reason why they've been in the NFL for 20 years and haven't had a breakthrough.
Right. I mean, there's this term promotability. There's a point where if someone hasn't been promoted after a certain amount of time, there's usually a reason. Not always. Bruce Arians was an example of a guy who was overlooked far too long, but sometimes they're overlooked for a reason that's a legitimate reason. So you want that. So I think, again, having looked at all this thoroughly and for quite a bit of time, I think a lot of fans are overrating that big resume. You need the right resume, but not necessarily a big resume. Few other folks I think jumped in here. Dakota Bedard, thanks for being here. I know my favorite coaching 30 years ago. I know my favorite coaching 30 years. I know changes into now. I'm not sure what you mean, but thank you for being here. Let's see. Few other folks I think that jumped in, or maybe I've got everyone at least once. Okay. So I want to quickly, before we get into talking about the current coaches, I want to talk about kind of my view on coach, how you should approach the coaching search right, or what I'm looking for, and kind of my views on this. And I would like to hear what your thoughts are. First of all, there's this, I've already talked about the experience thing. To me, it doesn't need to be someone who's had a long resume. It just needs to be the right kind of resume, a good resume. But there's this whole question of offensive coach versus defensive coach, right? Do you go with an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator? There are far more offensive minded coaches than there are defensive, right? And kind of my position on this, where I've come to at this point, and this will evolve over time if new information presents itself. But what the place I'm at right now is, if you're an offensive minded head coach, or if you're an offensive coordinator being promoted to head coach, you need to be good at the X's and O's, the game planning, the offensive system, and the play calling, right? And as a leader, you need to be a good leader, but not transcendent. Okay. You need to be a good enough leader and really good with the X's and O's. And you can be a successful NFL head coach as an offensive coach with that profile. All right. If you can install a good offense, call a good game, and do the right things on offensive side, and you're a good enough leader to get the job done, you can be successful. But with the defensive coach, it's almost the inverse. You need to be a next level leader and decent, or at least good with the X's and O's. Like the guy who is like just a master chess player on X's and O's on defense, but doesn't have next level leadership, is Vic Fangio, right? I'm sure he's a good leader. I'm not trying to downplay him, but he was a head coach and not particularly successful with Denver. Oh, he wasn't the worst, but he wasn't, he got fired, right? And I'm not saying he's a bad leader, but like, he's not Mike Tomlin. You know what I'm saying? Mike Tomlin is that dude, right? And someone like Vic Fangio is one of the most respected defensive coordinators and is in demand for that. But that profile of great defensive coordinator, good but not transcendent leader, I think isn't successful as a head coach. I think if you are a defensive-minded coach, you have to be that next level leader, like Mike Tomlin is, like I think DeMeco Ryans is and will be. But Vance Joseph wasn't. I think he's a good leader. Maybe he's close to that kind of leader. I don't know. I think he's a good leader, but he wasn't good enough to win. Todd Bowles, good defensive coordinator, maybe great, has not fared well in 2 head coach stints, right? So when I look at offensive coaches, to me, I want to see that there's an offense, that they're good on offense and they have the right pedigree and background. But when I'm looking at a defensive coach, I'm looking more at their leadership. I need to see that they have that next level leadership if I want to, and they have to be a good defensive coach, but they need that leadership. So that's how I look at it. What are your thoughts, Troy?
See, to me, like, the word leadership is so like, what is that? Like, leaders comes in all shapes, all sizes, all types. We've all had different like teachers, coaches, any kind of leadership figure that are all different. People react to it in different ways. So I don't want to say like a definite type leadership type, because who knows? To me, like, I think we need someone that understands what they're good at and who's good at what. Like, they don't have like an ego in terms of it's my way or the highway, or get out. Like, an anecdote I loved about like Nick Sirianni was, I don't know if you guys remember, but the Eagles started off terrible last year. I think they were like 1-3 or something like that. They weren't winning a lot of games, and he pulled himself from play calling duties because he's like, I can't do this. I get too into it. Like, and there's a whole other like meta, like the whole game I have to manage, and I can't do it if I'm focused on play calling. So we gave it to Shane Steichen, and guess what? The offense changed. They went on a run. The rest is history. So to me, a good coach is someone who has ego, but again, not
overdeveloped.
Yeah, like, let's be real. Any guy who's at this level has an ego. Like, right. The amount of dedication to time to be an NFL coach is insane, and there's definitely a sense of ego in that. But again, not enough where it blinds them. And someone who's really good at just adjustments in games, and either they're doing it or they know who or like what chess pieces to move in terms of their own staff or coordinators. Because I think where you see some of these guys fall apart, we saw with Nathaniel Hackett. Apparently he's a great offensive coordinator, all that stuff. But clearly when it came down to crunch time in games, he would just fall apart and make very simple mistakes. I mean, we all been there when we're under pressure. Like
Yeah.
if any guys worked in a kitchen or anything, and you're you're in the weeds, a bunch of tickets flying at you. Simple things become very difficult all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So, just need a guy who works good under pressure, who's can see the game from like a bird's eye view and make the choices. And again, leadership is whatever you want it to be, but I think as long as they command respect in the room and I think know how to coach and develop these players, because I think that's another thing too that is kind of going under the radar, or where some of the older coaches may be bumping up. And Tomlin has this great quote. It's like, guys don't want to coach anymore. Like they just expect these guys to come in ready to go, like because they're in professional athletes. But it's more than anything, 21-year-old kids aren't the same as they were 10, 20 years ago. There's a lot of, I think, for most of them, probably delayed maturity. So, and stuff like that. I mean, we're definitely seeing that across the league, I believe. So, I don't know. Yeah. It's
so
tough.
I do want to know, when I talk about leadership, I agree with you that can look a lot of ways. Like there isn't one. I'm not necessarily talking about having to be the rah cheerleader.
Yeah.
Like there's different ways of doing it, and maybe even culture is another word to look at. Like okay, Bill Belichick, obviously, like he's a different guy in practice than he is in press conferences, I'm sure. But like you wouldn't look at him and say he's this charismatic leader, but he creates this particular culture and is a stickler to it, and it works, right? That's one type of leadership. Getting people, Dan Campbell's a little more of a charismatic, kind of hard on his sleeve kind of a leader. So it can look different ways, but you have to have that quality, whatever it is, in terms of culture or leadership, in my opinion, to be successful if you're a defensive coach. And that might be being good at knowing how to identify, delegate, and lead talent, right? Like you talked about Sirianni, like it was part. Now I believe he's an offensive coach, but yeah, he is. But like for him, part of that leadership was knowing that he needed to step back and being willing to do that, right? But
because imagine if you're one of his coaches and he's like, damn, this dude like pulled himself from like that like an empowered Shane Steichen, like, and now we're winning. Like I think at the end of the day,
you're going to trust his decision making.
Exactly.
Right?
Leadership comes down to when you're in the foxhole, do you believe that guy is going to get you out of it? And again, who knows what that looks like? You could be the quiet Bill Belichick killer just grumbling on the end, or you could be whoever. But as long as those guys think you can get him out of that foxhole and cross the line, then that's really what leadership is to me.
Yeah. So again, I think it can look a lot of different ways, but I think that if you're a defensive coach, you have to be an ace in that in some way. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
If you're an offensive coach, I think you're an offensive coach and you're really good at the X's and O's, you can get away with a little bit less of that, in my opinion, and still win. And I guess what I'm saying, with the reason I'm kind of presenting that, is when we talk about the coaches and where things are right now, that's the lens I'm looking at these candidates with. If it's an offensive coach, I'm going to be a little more leeway in terms of what I expect from their leadership experience. If it's a defensive coach, I'm going to have more questions about that, if that makes sense. Let me get a few comments, and then we'll get into some of where things stand with the coaching search now, right? My buddy Beto's here, kicking it with Beto. Thank you for being here. He's a 49ers fan, really good dude. I've done some collabs with him. Just a really great person. Appreciate you, Beto. Hope you're still here and see that. Thanks for being here. Drew is saying, if I'm looking at a defensive coach, I need to know who he knows and who he can bring onto his staff on offense. If his options are limited and don't mesh your roster, bad moves. Yeah. And I'll tell you, you probably heard this. Did you even mention this? I heard it somewhere. I forget where, but there was a report that like coaches, when they're interviewing head coaches, especially defensive coaches, they're asking them not only who is going to be their offensive coordinator, but who is the offensive coordinator in the wings? Who is going to be the replacement?
I think we've talked about this. I think you've heard it somewhere. It wasn't from me, but yeah, it makes sense because if they're good, your offense coordinator's gone as a head coach somewhere else. So it's like,
you need a succession plan.
Yeah.
Who is your succession plan? Who is your quarterback's coach you're bringing in who's going to be the offensive coordinator in 3 years? Right. And that's the way things go these days, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So yeah, that's a great question and comment there. Let's see a few other folks that jumped in here. Want to make sure I get everyone at least once. Blazing Mono, thanks for being here. Sup all, appreciate you hanging out with us, right? Kafka or Anarumo is our guy. So let's talk about that. Okay. So where things stand right now, right, with the coaching search, okay? Obviously we know Payton's off the table, Ryan's right, and Reich, obviously. And there's some people that were interviewed back. Brian Flores, right, is a guy who was interviewed who we've talked about. Glenn from Detroit, Aaron Glenn was interviewed. Evero from Denver, and then they have scheduled and have, I think they've even conducted one or two of them. They've got interviews this week with some candidates, and others have said this. This isn't anything original to me, but first from me. But others have said there is a sense that the coaches who were interviewed prior to this week are probably not really under consideration anymore because if they haven't been brought back for a second interview, and they're turning their attention to this new slate of candidates. So the thought is, and I think John Gambadoro said this, that they weren't blown away by any of those candidates enough to bring them back for a second interview. So I tend to be of the opinion that probably our next head coach is one of the people they're interviewing this week, or maybe one of the Eagles coordinators who they can't interview yet, but they'll be my understanding is they can interview them next week, but can't hire them until after the Super Bowl is my understanding. I could be wrong, but so let's look at some of these candidates that are kind of still maybe on the radar. Now, Brian Flores, I'm including here because a lot of people are talking about him. I like him as a candidate. I know there were the questions about Miami, but I do think there's that leadership there potential. He just was working under Mike Tomlin, but a lot of people are saying, let's just hire him, move forward. But I really think I think they're probably not considering him anymore. Do you have any thoughts on the Flores situation?
Yeah, my biggest questions with him is his relationship with Tua was terrible, and whether he gets along with Kyler's one thing or not, but I just feel like some of that was just not like a little knee jerky, kind of too reactive than playing the long game. And B was because of that lawsuit, the NFL, like if you were to hire him, like what staff is he pulling from? Like how's coming with the staff, and like was there weird now like lines drawn in the sand because he has an active lawsuit, I think still, or whatever. So who knows? So yeah, that was my big questions. Yeah. And here's a question for you, Joe, or something to ponder.
Yeah.
What would you ask any of these candidates, or maybe they'll change for each one, but like what would you ask if you were interviewing them? Like what would you ask them? Like what would you want to know about them for the Cardinals?
With Brian Flores, the first thing I want to know is how do you feel about Kyler Murray? And what is your plan? Because he's our quarterback. How are you going to coach him, and what's your plan to help him be successful as our quarterback? Because he needs to be, that's where it starts.
Rumor was K1 is a Flores guy, or like or Flores wanted Kyler for the Dolphins.
So I would want to get a more qualitative sense of how he feels, not just I like him. I want to hear more. You know what I'm saying? Detail. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest question with Flores. Then it's what's your staff, right? Those are the two big things that I want to know. So yeah, that's really what I want to know from him. What would you ask him?
What do we do with Isaiah Simmons?
Okay. How do we use Simmons? That's a good question. Yeah.
Or like, is there a market? Like, this may be a little blasphemous. I'm down to trade him. If there's a good offer on the table, I'm like, I'm done with this. He's fine. I don't think he's terrible, but like, I just think he's elite in any position. So I don't know what we're doing anymore. Like,
I want to see how he does under a new coordinator.
For sure. But like if the DC's like, I don't know what to do, then it's just like, all right, cut bait, let's go.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it's like he was good. He graded pretty well, but if you're going to have to pay him a lot, you want better than that, right? So you have to have a plan for him, right?
And it's just sometimes people literally target him. They pick on him. Like the Chargers picked on him in the final drive, and they won the game off it, which is it's rough. Like that's it's one isolated series, but
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. Yeah. Real quick, I want to say hey to Alexis. Thanks for being here. What's up, fam? We appreciate you being here, hanging out with us for the group therapy session. All right, so let's look at the next candidate, one of the candidates they're interviewing this week, Brian Callahan. He is the offensive coordinator with the Cincinnati Bengals. He started out his coaching career in 2010 as a coaching assistant with the Broncos. Then he was an offensive quality control coach, offensive assistant. And then he went in 2016 to the Detroit Lions to be a quarterbacks coach. In 2018, he was with the Raiders as a quarterbacks coach. And then he has been the Bengals offensive coordinator since 2019. Obviously, they have, Joe Burrow there, that really good offense. He's, so he's under Zach Taylor. He fits the profile of that up and coming offensive coordinator from a good system who could be that next guy. So I think a lot of, people who want an offensive minded head coach, I think they look at him and he's got a little more experience than the next, or one of the guys we're going to talk about in a minute. So, I think he's an interesting candidate. What are your thoughts on Callahan?
I like it just because also, I mean, the big question with a lot of the Bengals, Zach Taylor and that, like, is Zach Taylor a good coach, or is Joe Burrow just kind of elevating, rising the whole ship? So I think you kind of got to suss that out with him. But what I like about him, at least the Bengals offense, is they adapt. I remember at the beginning of the year, the Bengals offense was not clicking, wasn't humming. All the pieces were there, but wasn't good. It's because they weren't throwing, or they weren't running the ball as much. So they made a concerted effort to, go like 50-50 between passing and running spread. And the fact they kept using the spread because Joe Burrow was really comfortable in it and knew how to use it, and they made it adapt it and work for the NFL. All good things. My question to him would be, is Joe Burrow as cool as we all think he is? And I don't know, just what in terms of like the spread, or like what would you take for Kyler? Like you made the spread work from Joe, for LSU they brought with you. What would you take from Oklahoma or whatever to work with Kyler?
Yeah, and I think for all these coaches, at least one of my questions has to do with Kyler, right? But like, I think for him, because he's an offensive coach, I want to start with, what are Kyler's limitations? Because I want to see if he's got how good of an assessment he has, the ability to assess that. And say, okay, now what are his strengths? Okay, now taking those both into account, tell me what kind of offense you're going to build for him and how it mitigates or minimizes those limitations and capitalizes on those strengths. And I want to hear how good is his awareness and knowledge, how comprehensive is his awareness of what Kyler is and isn't, and his plan for making the most of that. Right. Yeah. That's, to me, a really important question for him.
Yeah. Also in the chat, if you have good questions, throw them in there. Let's see.
Yeah. And I want to say hey to some of the folks who jumped in as well. Bub, thanks for being here, talking about your Simmons comment. Simmons is a kind guy, so as soon as the Cardinals trade him, he'll be a Pro Bowl on a Super Bowl team like Riddick, right?
Yeah. He's probably hoping for that.
Yeah, right. Moore's Legacy, thanks for being here. Brian is the man. He's a fan of Brian Callum. Dino, thanks for being here. Dino Vendeni, any thoughts on signing Jimmy Garoppolo as a starter until K1 returns and slide to backup? I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll maybe add.
I'm going to plagiarize someone's tweet I saw earlier today. It's like, Jimmy Garoppolo is one of the most injury-prone quarterbacks, so will be a very expensive backup to just get hurt again.
That's my big concern too. We're looking for someone to be a fill-in for our injured quarterback, and this is a quarterback who gets injured like more consistently than most. So he's a good quarterback, but he's going to probably cost a bit. He's going to be looking for a team where he can be the starter. He may or may not find that, but he's going to be looking for that, like, an Indianapolis kind of situation. So I don't think
if we're playing 40 chess and get him so the 49ers can't use him again, because I don't know if you guys saw, Purdy's out like next year. He's out. So they're going to have to play Trey Lance, who I think we all have a similar opinion that he's not very good.
There was a report that today, I think, that Shanahan said he doesn't see Garoppolo being back. So
yeah, but they said that last year though. Like they did a whole thing. They said Jimmy G's like said his goodbyes, and spoiler alert.
Yeah. So I will say, like, though, for me, it's a no, not because I don't think he's a good quarterback. It's because, again, we want someone who's not injury prone because that's what we need them for.
Brissett land.
Yeah, Brissett. Brissett to me is the guy. Patriots ties. He's a guy who's good enough, has experience, has been around. He's going to step in, and he's going to, if you build a good team around him, he's going to be the right guy for that situation, in my opinion. But thank you for the question. Appreciate you being here, Dino. Jordan P. Damn, I missed everything. Yeah, hopefully you can get back and watch it. But yeah, we've been going for a little while now. Costanassi, Brian Callahan, so he's a fan. Thanks for being here. Brian Perkins, thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Sorry, guys. I love you both, though. We appreciate you. Let's see. Jordan is saying, so hard as fans to see who will be a good head coach. Being a great DC or C doesn't always correlate. Yeah, it doesn't always, right? So for sure. Let's see if there's anyone else that I missed in here who just jumped in and hanging out with us. Maybe that's everyone at least once. So, okay. So I think he's a good candidate. I mean, I'll be honest, like those successful offensive coordinators actually have a pretty good rate of at least being decent, if not good coaches. So I'm willing to take a shot on that. He's got, it's hard to know. People sometimes talk about, well, who's really responsible? Is it Joe Burrow? Is it Zach Taylor? Is it him? And there was a Twitter conversation on this, and I responded to a tweet that sometimes if you have a situation where something good has been going on, sometimes it doesn't matter who was responsible for that. If the coach has been a part of that and learned under that and seen how that works and can bring that somewhere else, they can be successful. Zach Taylor was the quarterback's coach with the Rams, and he left, and the Rams won a Super Bowl without him. So clearly it wasn't Zach Taylor who made that work for them, but he has still gone on to be a good coach with the Bengals, right? So it doesn't. You want the guy who has the right skills, has learned in the right situation. So Callahan fixed that mold. Will he be successful? We don't know. But he fits the profile of what you're looking for. So I wouldn't mind that at all. Let's see. So the next person is Lou Anarumo, another Bengals coordinator, their defensive coordinator. Now I'm still learning about Lou. I don't know a lot about him. I watched an interview with him from a couple years ago just to get a sense of, what he talks and communicates like, just things like that. Excuse me. So, because he's a defensive coach, for me, like I said, it's that next level leadership I'm looking for. And I did find a tweet about him from someone I respect. Maybe not everyone likes this guy, but I like Louis Riddick from ESPN. And he said, spoke with Lou Anarumo again last night and going to say this again. The fact that nobody wants to hear about his leadership, team building / salary cap, staff construction, teaching and development, offensive and defensive and special teams philosophies via head coaching interview is a joke. Now, this was January 24th. So this sounds like a rousing endorsement of Anarumo, not just as an X's and O's defensive guy, but as someone who has a really good, according to Riddick, philosophy on how you build a roster, how you lead players, how you construct your staff. So that piqued my interest. So there's reason to believe he may be that kind of leader. I don't know. But for me, at least I'm willing to consider this guy. And my opinion of him as a candidate has gone up based on some of the things I'm hearing about his leadership. What are your thoughts on Anarumo?
He's interesting. I think in an interview not too long ago, they said, like, what's changed or whatever. He goes, nothing. Like, I've been calling the same defenses for the past 3 years now. Like, we just have better players now or something like that. So it's like not exactly a rousing endorsement for yourself. But I mean, I'm interested. Again, no one really knows much about this guy, so it's hard to tell. I do like the way that Bengals defense has been playing. They've been pretty lights out this past 2 years. So
with not the best personnel, they're okay, right?
They're okay, exactly
they
right.
Play above it.
Yeah, there's like Trey Hendricks and like one or two other guys are like elite, and other than that, it's just a bunch of guys, Right? Is Trey Hendricks on the Bengals?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know. He doesn't exactly stoke the fires, as it were.
He's not at the top of my list, but I'm intrigued, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Great name. Great name.
Yes, there you go. Zach Jacobs, thanks for being here. Could Rich Bisaccia or Leslie Frazier be options?
Pit boss Rich. Sorry, that's a Bill Simmons joke.
Right. I think if they were going to be options, we would have already heard about them. I think the Cardinals would have already interviewed them. They were, Leslie Frazier, you'd think they would have been interviewing him back when they were interviewing, Dan Quinn and Brian Flores. So could they be options? Anything can happen, but to me, I wouldn't bet on it because I think we would have already heard. They would have already been reaching out to them for interviews, I think. Do you have any thoughts or insights on that?
Yeah, again, if I think the list of names we have now, and again, potentially Gannon, are the only ones we're going to be seeing, unless if, God forbid, it really takes a weird turn.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's only one head coaching spot left besides us, so the Colts. And I was looking at their list of top
Jeff
candidates.
Saturday,
right? Their management is trying to talk Irsay out of hiring Jeff Saturday, right?
So we're circling back to the beginning. Like, we think we have it bad.
Right.
Just thank God we're not Colts fans at this moment in time.
My God. It's because they've built a good roster, I think, with a good GM, and then their owners just coming through here and messing it all up. So yes, right. So yeah, so I think he's an intriguing candidate. The one I want to talk about, and someone asked about this earlier, and listen, this is actually, I tweeted this out, and I know you saw that my list of how I rank these candidates that we're talking about now. I know a lot of people question me on this, and people question what has he done to be deserved to be a head coach. But Mike Kafka right now for me is actually the top of my list. He's the guy with the least experience of these guys. So I know people are like, I don't want you hurt, but if you've been here with us all night, I don't care about that experience in terms of a ton of experience if it's the right experience. And I think Mike Kafka has the right experience. Let me real quick summarize his kind of coaching. He was a backup quarterback, right, in the NFL. And he hasn't been coaching a long time, but the situations I look at where he's been, he started out as a graduate assistant at Northwestern in 2016. In 2017, he was an offensive quality control coach with the Kansas City Chiefs under, Andy Reid. And then he was the quarterbacks coach in Kansas City starting in 2018, and he's been that through 2021. In 2020, they added quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator. But in 2018 and 2019, he was just quarterbacks coach. So he was a quarterbacks coach for Patrick Mahomes during his MVP season, right? And then this last year, 2022, he was hired as the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants under Brian Daboll. And we talked about earlier how they overachieved, okay? And they turned, Daniel Jones, a guy, again, that I don't believe in as a long-term answer. To me, he's like a Mitchell Trubisky kind of guy. You can work with him, but you don't want him as your long-term guy. That's my opinion. But they made him super efficient, and they overachieved like anyone's expectations outside of the building, right? And to me, I look at him. Yeah, I'm not saying he's responsible for Patrick Mahomes MVP, but like I said earlier, he was there for that and saw what led to that. He's learned under Andy Reid, who's a great coach. And then now he's gone to New York Giants, and with a very different quarterback, with a very different level of skill and ability, and an offense that has very few playmakers. Like Saquon Barkley is the only like legit grade A playmaker on that offense. With Daniel Jones, and so a quarterback who's not nearly as talented as Patrick Mahomes, made it work, right? So this is a guy who, to me, has the right kind of experience, has shown what I want to see. Is it a risk? Absolutely. All these guys are risk, but this is a guy I'd be willing to take a chance on, and let's see, get him in here. What can he do offensively with Kyler? And can he be that next really good offensive head coach? So what are your thoughts now that I've kind of presented my whole thing on Kafka? What are your thoughts on Kafka?
The tea leaves were wrong. It wasn't Kingsbury that was supposed to lead us to promised land. It was Kafka. The wrong K. No, I'm very intrigued by Mike Kafka for all the things you mentioned, but also the fact that he didn't have any connections to Daboll. Daboll just picked him because he knew he was a good, and he's like, I want you on the Giants with me to be my offensive coordinator. And then during the preseason, Daboll's like, I really like the plays you're calling. You have it for the rest. You have it now, and never gave it back the whole season. So dude's supremely talented, very interested. again, some of the red flags are, I mean, he kind of just helped Daniel Jones not make as many mistakes, which Kyler doesn't really. Kyler's not turnover prone, as it were. So that's like he is not going to help in that area, but maybe develop the passing game more. Things that would not worry me, but my questions would be like, because he's so young, doesn't have a lot of
Yeah.
experience. What staff is he pulling from to build out the rest of it? Are we just going to have another, Keim building out a staff for Kingsbury again, which we all know that didn't turn out great. So he's interesting, and again, a guy who's super early on this. I think this was even before the season ended. It was Ben Albright, and they said like, "What do you think? What do you think like the Cardinals are going to do for a head coach?" And I think he said like, again, this is pretty early. He said, "I think they'll try for Payton. If not, they should swing hard for Kafka." And I was like, "Oh, like that's interesting because this never linked or anything." And I think he's like kind of the indie hipster choice of coordinators, maybe of the NFL, if you will.
Is the IPA coach? Is that what he is?
Exactly. Yeah, he's the IPA. I mean, he's got the beard. He's bald
Right.
guy with the beard.
I love the look. It just needs a little more gray.
Exactly.
And he's golden, right?
Yeah. So in terms of like of all those list of coaches, he excites me the most. Again, like, do we want to go another young guy with limited experience? Who knows? Sometimes you have to double down on your initial decision. But I like him as well. I think he's out of the list of names we have, I think he's number one for me at the moment.
Bald men unite. That's right. I love your point. I hadn't thought of it that way. I love your point about the fact that he wasn't a guy that like Dable had on his own staff and that had like worked he wasn't like, the quarterback's coach for Dable, then promoted. Dable picked him. He said, I want you. Now I don't know, and I'd have to look at it. And I don't know if
someone said that on Twitter, by the way. That wasn't my original thought.
But you're right. But you look at where Dable's coached; it's not the places that Kafka coached. Now I don't know if Kafka ever played for him because he was a player, a quarterback. But
I think that was at Northwestern though, and I don't think Dable's like an Alabama or something.
Kafka was in the NFL for a backup. So
yeah.
I don't know. If someone wants to check that. But the main thing here is like, I think that's a great point though. Like that he picked him from another staff without having, had him on his own staff.
Because the NFL is all about the guys just pick their guys. Like there's very rarely ever branching out in the tree, as it were. So
right. No, so I think that's a great point. So some folks, I think some people are intrigued, right? Van, okay, I like your point. Roberto Lincoln saying Mike Kafka seems like a pretty good option in my opinion, right? Van is saying my Mike Kafka interest went up, so we're maybe a little persuasive, right? Van saying Kyler is turnover prone. You mentioned that. I would say this, Kyler in bad situations, he makes turnovers when things fall apart too much, but I think he's not like he's a guy who gets like 11 in a normal year will get 11 interceptions. That's not extremely turnover prone, but it's not, Alex Smith, but
last year, like his touchdown to interception on the good side. So
on the good side. So I wouldn't describe him as turnover prone, but I would describe him. Also wouldn't describe him as like super conservative and safe, like someone like, Alex Smith is a prototype of that. But I think he's kind of middle, but he's not a guy. He's no Jameis Winston. That's for sure. Right.
30 for 30.
Yeah. Right. If Kafka's the guy, Bidwell should shave his head. Right.
I'll shave my head if he's the guy. I'm just kidding. But
I was going to hold you to that. Good thing you backed that down. Right.
Well, if you win the Super Bowl with Kafka, I'll shave my head. I don't give a shit.
Okay. Nice. So let's see. A couple other comments we'll get to. Chris Young, we should be careful not to overreact too much just because K2 didn't work out. Just because somebody has similar traits or experience doesn't mean you should avoid them completely. And I agree with that. Like,
someone that has understood the point of this whole show.
Yeah, I get it. We get kind of scorned by things, right? And I always like to give the example of the Detroit Lions in the 2000s when they kept drafting these early first-round receivers that were failing. Right. And they just drafted like 3 of them, I think, early in the first round that all failed. And and then they drafted, Calvin Johnson. And a lot of people are like, oh no, another first round receiver. It doesn't work until it does. Right. But like you sometimes, you make a mistake and you want to be careful to learn from it, but the pendulum can shift too far, and you can say, well, we're never hiring a young offensive coach. Well, no, the young offensive coaches work a lot. You just gotta get it right. Maybe don't hire someone who's never had coaching experience in the NFL, like Cliff, right? Maybe hire someone who's shown that their offense works in the NFL, right? And it's still a risk, but you got to learn from it, right? So 100%. Randy's asking, TCR, have you ever done analysis of former players, coaches versus non-former player coaches? I have not formally done that. I can tell you, looking at it, just kind of eyeballing, because I do look at where coaches come from, and I think a lot of us look at this. What you do see is most of the best coaches have played at least college, and some of them were backups in the NFL. But very few of them were top rate players in the NFL, which, maybe that's the concern for DeMeco Ryans, right? He was actually too good of a player, but most of them were guys that were like a quarterback in college, a defensive back in college, maybe played in the NFL some. I think you see more good defensive players, I guess, like, you see a lot of guys who were played, cornerback in the NFL or whatever for years and were decent, but it feels like it's guys with some playing experience, but not the stars, if that makes sense. But level 7 here, is Brian Flores a bust? Who we fooling at? No, it's not Brian Flores a bust. Maybe you need to go back and watch, because we just spent an hour and 20 minutes unpacking why it's not, but appreciate you being here nonetheless. Let's see if there's any other comments we want to hit on here. I think, GW Wild, thanks for being here. Grandpa used to say, nothing works until it doesn't, right? Right. So yeah, for sure. Right. And Jordan P saying the lack of extensive experience won't matter if Kafka impresses with leadership skills and philosophy. He's smart enough to run an offense, but what do the intangibles look like? Right. Yeah. So yeah. So listen, we've talked about the case for optimism. We've talked about, let me show this. There was a poll I ran before the stream, and this is the opinions. Now it's 189 votes. There's probably more now. I'll be interested to see if that Mike Kafka starts inching up, because he was the lowest. But Brian Flores, at the time I pulled this about 20 minutes before it went live, I think. So Brian Flores had 58% of the vote. Then Brian Callen with 20% was next. Then Lou Anarumo with 14%, Mike Kafka with 2%, and then someone else 6%. What are your thoughts on the poll results, at least as they were from this point in time?
I mean, I think the Flores kind of tracks. He's the betting favorite technically, but again, we've discussed extensively that the voting odds don't really have any concept of reality. So that makes sense. I think, Flores is the big one. Callahan is the offense coordinator, probably edging out the defense. Yeah. But yeah, I'd be curious if Kafka, if we pumped his stock up a bit, then we're all just going to sell it for the Wolf of Wall Street.
Right. I will tell you, I just refreshed a look at Kafka's up to 3%.
Hey,
he's making a move.
Making a move.
When I looked at this, my first impression was, Brian Flores, it's a name we've talked about the most, so that's part of it. But I also think obviously I put in there what their current job is, and I mentioned former Miami head coach. I think the Brian Flores vote is the vote for experience. It's people who want more experience. Now, although Anarumo, if people don't know this, has actually a lot of experience. He's older, but no head coaching experience. But I think the people who are voting for Flores, it's part actually that it's Flores, and it's also part the people who are leery of a first-time head coach. So I think that's a big part of that.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned we've Edward saying someone else, Steichen. And the only reason I didn't include Steichen is he's not yet. I mentioned that.
Have they even asked for him?
What's that?
Have they even? I think there's been no buzz for Steichen.
Not that I've heard of. Yes.
I've heard of Gannon links, but I've not heard of any Steichen links.
Exactly. Now we may see that, right? But yeah, so I didn't include anyone from the Eagles, but we may hear about them soon. We'll see, right?
And for those that people say Gannon's staying, who knows? He said that after they just won the NFC Championship to a reporter.
Yeah.
All that changes when the Super Bowl's done.
Right, for sure. Jalen Blair, thanks for being here. Saying late to the party, but I like to see the Cards at least interview Steichen or Gannon. Like, I think we talked about this earlier. If they don't make a hire this week, I do think they'll probably interview at least one of those guys, if not both, right? But yeah, and Jared P saying this has kind of been going around that Steichen reportedly bombed the Panthers interview. So we'll see, right? And Roberto saying this. I know this. He's probably responding to someone, but this is something I mentioned earlier. Nick Sirianni was the first-time head coach. Look at the Eagles now, right? So we've spent a lot of time. If you just got in recently, I hope you'll go back and watch it because we spent a good bit of time looking at those first-time head coaches that have been successful and how. Listen, yes, there's guys that struggle, right? But it's more, people succeed more than you think. And for the last 6 years, every year, there's been at least one or two guys, and some years 3, that I would take as our head coach, with the exception of 2020, like we talked about. So the case for hope is it is not Payton or Ryan's or bust. It's not even Flores or bust for some who say that. There's a coach out there who I believe can take us to the Super Bowl if our GM gets the roster right. The trick is we got to get the interview right and take our time and find that guy. But there's a good coach out there, probably 2 or 3 of them. We need to find the right guy, build the right roster around him. And yes, I understand people who say, well, do you trust the Cardinals to do that? Not with their history. I understand that's a fair criticism. And I don't know that they're going to get it right. But if you're looking for is something different, something's different. They've hired a GM from outside the organization for the first time since Buddy Ryan, and Buddy Ryan was a coach GM, so that don't count, right? Something's different. This could be a turning point. We have to wait and see if it is. I'm optimistic. I'm giving it a chance. So that's the case for optimism, right?
1000%. I think as long as the ship is all going, all the oars are going the same direction, all the caterpillar legs are going, that's like a step ahead of where we were. Like, with Kime and Cliff, like there was such a dysfunction, lack of being on the same page. Like we're just spinning in circles, Kime with no red shirt year to Zayvon Collins. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Red shirt
Dude never saw the field. So I think because you could have Sean Payton, you could have Bill, but you can have the best head coach out there. But if their roster sucks, no one's winning. And there's been coaches who probably aren't very great who's won Super Bowls because guess what? Their team carried them there too. Say what you will about it's so funny. Everyone hates on Mike McCarthy, he's won a Super Bowl, so it's always argument, is he a good coach or did he just have Aaron Rodgers and a really good team? So it's so again, it's all, we could have a medium head coach, but as long as we're drafting right and getting good squad around them and everyone has the same vision and is realistic on where this team is at, it's going to be better than what we had. I don't think Vance is going to be the head coach just because why would they get a new GM, fire Cliff if it was just going to be the same kit and caboodle?
I would be shocked if Vance was the head coach. I don't think Michael Bidwell's going through let all those people go just to hire someone that would be panned by fans and media. I think he's going to hire someone else. I do think, and I know some people hate this. I'm not saying I'm supporting this or against it. I think if we have if someone like Callahan or Kafka is our next coach, or even Steichen, I think Vance was going to be the DC. I really do. We'll see, right? But I think that's probably I have a feeling that's going to happen. I want to get a few of the questions and comments, and then we're going to wrap it up. We've gone an hour and a half. Again, if you just came in later, please go back and watch. I hope you watch the beginning because we really talked about some of these things in depth. There's reason to be optimistic. We don't want to be naive. They have to get it right, but it is not hopeless, right? So a couple comments, and then we'll get to let's see. There was one I wanted to start with. Let's see. Abe G saying Nick Sirianni had experience beforehand. You don't need head coach experience, but we don't want to have another Cliff. Be careful with Kafka. And the counter to that I talked about is, again, the issue with Cliff. his experience wasn't at the NFL. So with Kafka, his experience coaching is the NFL, right? So that's to me the difference, right? So you don't need head coaching experience, that's right. But what you need is NFL experience coaching, and Kafka has that. So could he flounder? Sure, but I feel I'm not worried about that personally, right? Herrick, thanks for being here. I'm leaning more towards Lou, honestly. A great team building mentality philosophy is what this team needs. I really believe he can take this team to the next level. I would support, again, he's not the top of my list, but I'm intrigued, and I'm not turned off by a defensive coach. Like I said, I'm hearing that there's the leadership stuff there. I think Monty's going to build a good roster for him. So I'd go with it, right? I'm not going to be upset about that. Will you or have you play the John Michael Schmidt song? I have not. That's a mock draft Monday thing. Maybe I'll play that on our way out just for everyone.
Seen some of the Senior Bowl tape. It's
Dude,
looking
that guy,
good.
Yeah.
I think because I'm not too far away from the practice facility, I'm just going to leave notes on the door every day of just draft John Michael Jingleheimer Schmidt. And then I'll get promptly arrested. So just kidding. I will not do that.
You won't. And now there's evidence, right? That
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's very incriminating. So I'm definitely not doing it.
1-800-lawyer up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
NDN Productions, what head coaches are there that left that are good? Well, you're gonna have to go back and watch because we just talked about it. you must have just dropped in. Go back, but seriously, go back and watch. We got into that probably in the last half hour or so. So check that out. For sure, please do. Matthew Burgess is got the. I'm responding to something with that, but yeah. Thank you for being here, though. Yeah, just no Vance. I'll be thrilled, right? Yeah, right. I'm here with you too, right? And Rose is saying if it was Vance, I'd give him a second view. It's not Vance. I think that's. I mean, potentially they already know a lot about him. They might not give him. They might, if they were going to hire him, I could see it happening without a second interview because they know him already. I just don't think they're going to hire him. And, so I again, if I'm wrong, boy, that's the one person. And I like him. I like Vance Joseph as a person and even as a leader. But if they hire him, I will be critical of that. For sure. All right. So I think that's it. We're going to get out of here in just a minute. I'm going to give you a chance, though. Oh, I want to say hey to Calvin. Thank you for being here, Calvin. Voting odds have no concept of reality. If so, why have a vote? Oh, okay, he's responding to something. Okay. I
think gambling odds have no concept of reality. Because Sean Payton was like one of the favorites to get it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Gambling odds, it's they're predicting, but they're also trying to control where the butts are going. So there's a multiple things, and it doesn't correlate directly to odds. That's sometimes if there's a lot of betting on one side, they'll adjust that just to get more money in so anyway, yeah. Okay, Troy, anything you want to say on our way out? Anything you want to promote or anything any final words of wisdom or encouragement before we get out of here?
No, just it's going to be a fun 2 weeks. Maybe, we could have the future of Arizona Cardinals. And if not, then just watch ASU right now. Kenny Dillingham's doing some exciting recruits or whatever. So
yeah, I heard about that. They got a good quarterback recruit, right?
Yeah, the guy I guess he was committed to Florida, but they didn't pay him his NIL money, so he came to ASU. So I was like, oh, whatever. So yeah, no, I'm excited. Kafka party. Sorry, I had a joke in my head that I'm not going to say because it's not appropriate. Kafka party is ready to go. No, I'll tell you off camera.
I'm looking forward to that, but also scared.
No, so we'll just see. Kafka, I mean, it'll all work out in the end, guys. I think as long as all the wheels are spinning in the right direction, it's a improvement over last year.
Yes, I'm excited about this offseason. There's a lot of unknowns. There's anxiety, but excitement mixed. So I'm looking forward to seeing how things play out. As we get out of here, I want to promote Mock Draft Mondays. If you haven't been hanging out with us, you're missing out. I get a different co-host kind of revolving every week. So I've got some folks lined up. Troy has been with me. He'll be back again at some point. Every Monday we do mock drafts. We learn about the prospects. It's a chance for us to learn about who some of these draft prospects are, especially further down the draft board. I profile a new player every week so you can learn about them. And you can submit your mock draft to get it on the show, and we'll totally tear it apart. No, we'll give our feedback and our thoughts, and it's a lot of fun. We do that every Monday night here. And if you go into any of the videos of the past episodes, you'll see how to submit your mock draft. And mock draft Mondays, it is all about John Michael Schmitz, right? Number 3 overall pick in the first round of the NFL draft, Arizona Cardinals is John Michael Schmitz, right? Joseph of TCR pounded table for John Michael Schmitz, right? The best center. We need a center, right? So, in fact, just so you get a sense of the fun you're missing out on, right? As we get out of here, I put together a song. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to warn you, it's me singing. So get ready for some pain in your ears. The John Michael Schmitz song. It's a lot of, it's fun, something we did for fun. So I will play that on our way out. We're going to get out of here, but thank you guys for hanging out with us at the therapy session. Hopefully, if you've been here with us, you feel a little less anxious, a little more optimistic. They still got to go out and hire the right guy, but there's hope. We're going to get out of here. Thanks, guys. Peace.
John Michael, he's our center Schmitz. His name's on my draft too. No matter what they say, this mock is A-okay. It's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.